Good evening, and welcome to the September 7th, 2016 Board of Education meeting. The board has been in executive session since 6 p.m. discussing an individual personnel matter. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I know it's a little early in the season because school just started today, but welcome back to the students. Are there any participation in government students here this evening? Okay, good. Your requirement is to stay till 9 o'clock. If the meeting is still going on at 9, we'll take a break. You'll need to come up and sign out on the sheets up here. And if you have any documents that you need board members to sign, we can do that for you at that time. If we get done before 9 o'clock, then just come up at the end of the meeting. Okay, thank you. Introductions? Dave Hurst.
Christine Beck.
Michael Cooper.
Joanne Cunningham.
Jody Monroe.
Matt Downey.
Lynn Lenhart.
Jonathan Fishbein.
Charmaine Widgesinger.
And Judy Kehoe.
First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the August 10th, 2016 regular board meeting.
So moved.
That's a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? That item carries. Next, the superintendent's report.
Thank you,
Ms.
Mr.
Monroe?
Downey. So today was the beginning, official beginning of the 2016-17 school year. It was nice to see all the students return. It's a little warm today and tomorrow, but the forecast says it's going to cool down next week, so we should be good. But it was great. It's great to have everyone back. Next, I wanted to just touch briefly on the goals. We had a board retreat this summer. We had our administrative retreat a couple weeks ago. And if you can just scroll up those a little bit, Brittany. So the mission statement, people have seen those for many years now. And then the board at the administrative retreat developed these goals. They're kind of a continuation of last year with a few minor edits. So from that, at the administrative retreat, we developed action items that coincide with the district goals. So if you could bring. So the district planning cycle, I took the time frame that we had and just developed the process that we'll use in the future for our planning and goal setting. You can see that this year is a little bit different, but moving forward, we'll get on a cycle where we're looking at fall, spring, and summer, setting the goals, evaluating those goals, and help in planning for our budget process. And the action items. And we will get this out to staff in the community. Essentially, what we had is the administrators, we worked together to look at the board goals and then developed an action plan for each of those. You can see there's responsibility, there's lead and support people or groups of people identified, there's a time frame identified, and what's the evidence of completion and a vision associated with all of those. So there are 2 goals under knowledge. And you can see the time frame for those, and there's data associated with how we'll evaluate all of those. There's 1 under character, which is a relatively large item. It's healthy schools. We've talked about mental health issues. We want to address a healthy environment for our students, student engagement and well-being. So we have identified a steering committee to start with that because it's a rather large undertaking, and from that we'll probably identify subgroups to continue to work on those particular areas to create a positive, welcoming, and environment that's safe and supportive for students. And under value, we have obviously the bond, which you'll hear a little bit more about tonight, and trying to create more field experiences and internships for students, particularly our high school students, but even some in the middle school, and how we'll go about continuing that work as well. So we'll send this out for everyone so that the community has access to it. We'll post it on our website like we did last year, but the plans are a little more laid out this year. The one other area that we spoke about at our board retreat, we talked about getting feedback from the administrators on the goals, knowledge, character, value, and the mission statement. And their feedback generally was that The mission statement seems a bit long. If it's a statement, then really it should be a statement that people can recite. And so if there's a way to potentially pare that down, and knowledge, character, and value were generally thought that they work pretty well. The one area that they thought might need some addressing is value, because it focuses more on just the fiscal, and there's maybe a little more to value than just that. So that was the feedback on our current mission statement and goals.
Can I ask, when would we pick that back up, given that feedback? Would we work on that during our winter retreat? Do we plan on working on it before that with the board? Integrating feedback or
Feedback for,
from the administrators on for example, the mission statement, if they said it was too long or too
Oh.
wordy?
that's up, whatever you prefer. If you want to do that at, we have a fall retreat schedule, we could talk more about that, or winter, and decide how we want to move forward with that. Any other questions on, thoughts on that? And finally, the last thing is, we had talked, we have a bond presentation tonight, and we had talked at the last meeting about trying to reach out to additional groups who maybe are not likely to attend board meetings in the evening. So we've scheduled, Judy, Greg, and I have 2 meetings scheduled to present the potential bond to community members. We'll be presenting at the library on September 22nd between 10:30 and 11:30 a.m. And we'll also be presenting to the Progress Club on October 3rd at 10 a.m. at the library. So if any board members want to attend that, you're welcome to. But we have information on our website. We'll send more SNNs out and notices, and hopefully we'll get some different people who maybe are not able to come to the board meetings in the evening.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the Progress Club date? Was it October 3rd?
October 3rd at 10 a.m.
Thank you.
That's my report.
Should be a Monday. First
Anyone
Monday.
have any additional questions for Jody? Yes.
Yeah. Have we gotten any additional feedback through the website mechanism at all?
For the bond
Yeah, for the
questions?
bond.
No.
Okay.
Since our last meeting.
And does that October timeframe, does that still sort of give us enough time to, with keeping with the cycle, so that we're not sort of tripping into the following?
Well,
year?
that's what Greg's going to talk
Okay.
about tonight. That's what we need to decide tonight is
Okay.
what would be the total dollar amount we want to potentially go out with, and what would be the timing of when we would want to have that vote,
Okay.
so.
Anyone else? Thank you, Jody, very much. Next is the Board of Education report. I do have one thing that, it's a coming item. The Capital Area School Boards Association is going to be having a meeting, can't remember, I'll get it out to the rest of the board, either 27th or 28th?
So we just got the notice. I think
Okay.
it's September 27th at Shaker.
27th at Shaker, and the Commissioner of Education will be at that board, at that meeting, to discuss various topics with the Capital Region School Board members. So I'd encourage everybody that, if you can, to make it that evening. Anyone?
I
Yeah,
just,
sure.
I know a number of us were at the opening day remarks, the kickoff, that was, I know that Matt made remarks, and as did Jody. I just want to commend the use of humor and the lightness of the event. There was some videos, some music, and the song, I don't know if you want to mention the
Yeah.
song that was
Yes.
written
Yeah,
for the
I Am the-
district.
I Am
but,
the Eagle.
It's great, a great day, great day, so.
Right.
Yeah.
An alumni, Mike DeAngelis, wrote a song, I Am an Eagle. It's been about a year in the making.
Yep.
Professional song done with himself and several other performers. And it was played that day to a slideshow. It was phenomenal, well received by everybody. In fact, I know there were postings on Facebook, and he shared it out there with the community and whatnot. So we thank him for his work on that, and again, thank him. He just actually retired in June as one of our teachers, so.
My husband even emailed it to the class of 65 so that they could see it too. And then we also had the new teacher orientation also.
Yeah. Right,
That was great. It was a nice cadre of new teachers, new staff. I mean, we had some very lean years, and of course, we did have quite a few people retire this past year, so that need to be replaced, but I think there were additional staff members also, so it was very welcoming to see all the new faces, many of whom seemed like they were students themselves, as opposed to teachers. But look forward to all of them having a very good year.
Anyone else, anything? Okay. We'll move on, and next will be our presentations. The first presentation is an academic update. Dave Hurst will be giving that.
Okay, thank you. Before I begin the presentation, I did want to take a quick moment to acknowledge that many of the building principals and supervisors are here joining us for the presentation. I certainly could not have put this presentation together without their support, so I'm grateful that they helped me with the presentation and that they're here to support the presentation itself tonight. So to sort of piggyback on Jody's remarks involving the mission statement and our goals of knowledge, character, and value, one of the things that we're going to do this year is for any presentation is we're going to try and highlight which of the goals that presentation is tied to. And obviously this particular presentation is tied to the knowledge goal. So quick recap of our overall results. We've once again made adequate yearly progress on all exams and among all of our subgroups. So therefore, we're a district in good standing. All of our schools are also in good standing. And just to, again, go over the time frame, we're now pretty well deep into the implementation of the Common Core. And as many of you know, this past summer, there was actually a review committee of the standards, and the standards will be going back out, the revisions will be going back out for public review this fall. And we will have yet another set of revised standards coming out in the spring of this year with implementation for the 2018 school year. So the state has a 5-year process where they have to review standards every 5 years, and we're now 5 years into the Common Core standards being released, so it's time to relook at them. So we'll be talking more about the adoption and transition to enhanced standards in the next few years. So in 2012-13 is really when we began the implementation. 13-14 kicked off at the high school level, Algebra 1, and the beginning of the ELA instruction. 14-15 was the geometry, and then this past year was Algebra 2. And if you recall, with the first two exams, the Algebra 1 and the geometry, there was a safety net available to students where they could take both the old and the new exam, and the higher of the two would count. That option was still available for the Algebra 2. We chose not to go that route because the courses are so vastly different. The new Algebra 2 curriculum is very heavy in statistics, whereas the old Algebra 2 trig curriculum was very heavy in trig. There's just not enough commonality where you'd ever be able to prepare kids for both exams. I'm happy to announce that that plan worked out well. 100% of our students passed the new Algebra 2 exam. And actually the lowest score district-wide was a 71 on that exam. So not double testing the kids proved to be a worthwhile effort. We were able to really focus on the new curriculum and prepare kids as they should rather than trying to mash the two curriculums together. It proved very beneficial to us. We did have a cohort of students, about 100 of them, take the old Algebra 2 trig exam because they were in a 2-year stretch program. So they were still able to take advantage of that. We also offered the new Regents and Comprehensive, or the ELA and Common Core that replaced the Comprehensive English, and we had very good results with that as well. So just taking a quick look then at sort of how that stacks up for us. This is similar to a report that was in the Times Union not too long ago. In both ELA and math, our students are performing at a very high level on the 3 through 8 tests. About 62% are proficient in the ELA and 65% in math. And we'll go more into detail with these numbers on the next few slides. So here's just more of a breakdown in terms of the ELA, looking at it 3 through 8 at individual grade levels, both ELA and math. For all of these levels, our performance has actually gone up in the past year, with the exception of grades 3 and 5, and I'll speak a little more to that in a bit. But both ELA and math grades through 5 saw a small dip. Statewide, grade 5 saw a tremendous dip, and they were actually reviewing the 5th grade test because as a whole, the state dipped so much. I can't imagine anything's going to come of it. It's sort of, water under the bridge, but they are taking a look at what the root cause could be for the 5th grade results on a statewide level to drop as much as they did. And just as a reminder, these, the 7th and 8th grade numbers don't include our accelerated students for math because they take the Regents exams. But if we were to sort of project that out and use the proficiency level from the Regents exams and sort of backfill that, you can see that our 7th and 8th grade numbers for math jump up substantially, and they're more in line with what you see for the 6th grade numbers. So once again, opt-out was a big phenomenon. We saw in the grades 3 through 5, we did not see really much change. It stayed pretty flat. But grades 6 through 8, we saw about a 9%, our participation rate. We had about a 20% opt-out rate last year. This year, we had about a 30% opt-out rate. So, quite a large increase at the middle school level, whereas the 3 through 5 stayed fairly flat. That was for ELA and math. We see the same thing. The 3 through 5 stayed fairly flat, whereas the 6 through 8, we had quite a substantial jump.
Can I have just a question on the grade 8, the 31% who took the Regents?
Sure.
Is that saying that 31% of the kids are accelerated in math?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I was reading.
And
that
out of that, about 120 of the students are single accelerated, and about 30 are double accelerated.
Thank you.
And we are seeing an uptick in the number that are double accelerated. And if you recall, historically, we had a hard time running, projecting ahead. We were struggling to get enough students to run the capstone Calc 3 linear algebra program. There were years we were running that with 13, 14 students. This year that has 26 students in it. So not only are we able to have more numbers at the middle school, that's actually carrying through. So those students are being successful long-term, not just at the entry level.
Dave,
Yes.
so the number of the opt-outs for basically the middle school is going up, and it sounds like pretty significantly.
It went up about 40%. I mean, it went from 20% to 30%.
Right.
Yeah, ballpark.
So what are we doing about that? I mean, clearly, and this message is pretty pervasive out, especially social media, that the over-testing is a big problem, especially, as you get to higher grades, kids are more stressed out. Is there anything in our discretion we can do? I know we've done some things where we don't do the field test, but is there anything else?
So the board passed a resolution a couple of years ago that we're not participating in field testing to avoid double testing. We have, some districts still have their 7th and 8th graders take both tests because of the school accountability and report card. In APPR purposes, the state was supposed to have included those results for APPR purposes and have not to date. So that's somewhat detrimental for the teachers, although now the APPR scores don't count. So anything that we have the ability to opt out of, we have been. We just got notified that we were selected to have to administer in the middle school the NAEP exam. I have to look into that further to see if we're required to do that or that's another test for middle schoolers. I think one of the issues with middle school is, as opposed to elementary, is middle school students, they see their friends not taking it and they're like, I'm not taking this exam. And even the students who do take it, I'm not sure if half the class who's not taking it, how seriously the ones who are taking it are doing. So it's a challenge, I think, until, I know the state has been working on trying to improve the data schools are getting and information that parents are getting and the value of the test. But I think until there's some significant movement there, I don't see the opt-out movement going away.
And speaking with the parents of opt-out students, one of the biggest concerns they have, they just don't see value to the
Right.
test. You're putting 3 days of ELA testing, 3 days of math testing, all this time invested. What is it doing for my student? And we really don't have a great answer for that. So until we have a good answer for that, I can see this movement certainly not diminishing, but it could continue to creep up.
I mean, the students take the test in April. The parents Did you get your results
No.
yet?
They were just
Parents
posted
have not
they're on
gotten the
Aspen,
results yet.
last week they got posted to Aspen.
Right. So,
I do have one question on I know it stayed the same between fourth, well, it dropped in fifth grade, but we use those exams to some degree to determine math placement for advanced math. What are you doing for the students
So,
who
I mean,
are
we.
opting out that maybe?
We have
they're not
several
students?
criteria, that's one of the criteria. And interestingly enough, when we looked at last year, the students in fourth grade that took the acceleration placement test, all but one student actually also took the 3 through 8 testing. That's just one of the many measures that we use, and really, the way we use it is, it's typically sort of the students that, you know, if it comes down to these 4 kids sort of have similar criteria, if that measure is available for all 4 kids, then that's one we can use to sort of separate who out of that group could
But would we
potentially.
not place if they don't have a score and you're comparing
No.
them against
No.
kids that do?
No, it's like I said, it's a holistic placement, it's just one measure. It's typically used, that's one of the last measures we look at, and it's used as sort of, like I said, if comes down to, you know, typically, say, if we're gonna allow 30 students in, the first 20 are sort of the no-brainers, and then you come down to students that are sort of ranked 20 to 40, that's where you have to start to parse things out. And the last 2 years that we've been able to do it, we haven't run into the situation where that score wasn't available, but it's just one more measure that we can use. Fortunately, at the elementary level, we have the interim assessments that we give 3 times a year. Those prove to be very valuable, and they also prove to be very good predictors on how the students will do on the state assessments. We have their classroom assessments. We have Ames Web. We have enough other data points that the state is just one piece of the puzzle if it's available, but if it's not, it doesn't help or hurt necessarily a student.
Thank you.
So again, I alluded to being able to compare, we looked at the capital district sort of rankings, but now we'll just look a little bit more at a broader level. In terms of a state performance, you can see that, you know, we outperform the state at a pretty good clip, and, you know, we should. But how do we stack up against sort of the top tier schools, I guess is what people really want to know. So when you compare us to the state as a whole, I'd like to look at 2 different measures, the scale score and the percent scoring level 3-4, just to get an idea of where we stack up against all of the schools in the state that participated in these tests. There's about 700 districts. So, and by percentile, basically what that means is if we look at like grade 3 for the scale score, 88th percentile basically means that we've scored at or above 88% of all the other schools in the state. So the reason this is nice to look at, because if you just were to take a look at a score back here, say 62% of our students were proficient, well, you don't know what is 62% proficient. Is that a good number? Is that a bad number? You need to see what it is in terms of how it relates to other schools. And you can see that it's actually a pretty good number because, you know, only 12% of the schools in the state performed at a higher level than that. So in looking at these rankings in all grade levels except grades 3 and 5, we did improve upon last year's results. The same thing can be said for math. We actually saw a huge, going the wrong way. We actually saw a huge increase in our, if you remember last year, our Math 8, we only had 25% of our students proficient in math at grade 8. This year, it jumped quite a bit. We're up to 43%. Recall, we're now entering our 3rd year using the new textbook program at the middle school. And I think that it's really starting to prove to be worthwhile. Each summer, the last 2 years, we've taken the state test data. We've taken a look at what types of questions tend to appear on the assessments more often, and we're able to adjust our curriculum and the rigor of our curriculum to match that. And again, if we were to add in the students that took the Regents exam, those numbers, again, jump up even more to 73 and 67%. So, and again, looking at comparative to the rest of the state, you can see our middle school, you know, we're now performing at a very, very high level. We're, you know, 96, 95, 88th percentiles. Whereas if you go back 2 years, we were in the low to mid 80s. So the new series is really in the professional development we've done, and the rewriting of curriculum that we've done over the summer is really starting to prove worthwhile. So now we're sort of 3, 4, 5. We've had this textbook series in place now for 5 years, and we're starting to see a little bit of regression in grades 3 and 5. So that's our focus this year, is to take a look at what's happening at the grades 3, 4, 5 level, and sort of take the lessons learned at 6, 7, 8 and try to improve the program there, so that it gets back up to the level that it was a couple of years ago. And again, these results don't include the double testing. So even with the 7th and 8th graders, this data does not include any of our accelerated students. We're still in the 92nd and 91st percentile. So that's pretty impressive. So just to give an idea of where we were last year versus this year, you can see on the ELA exam, every single grade level did increase. Some pretty sizable jumps in 4th, 7th, and 8th grade. 3rd grade went up quite a bit as well, but if you look comparatively to the rest of the state, 3rd and 5th grade, again, we're still not quite where we'd like to be. The same can be said for math. You can see very clearly 3rd and 5th, we actually had some regression, but the other grade levels, especially 7th and 8th, we saw some pretty sizable gains. And again, 7th and 8th grade does not include the accelerated students. And if we take a look at our students with disabilities, you can see that obviously our level of proficiency with those students is much lower than with our general education students. But it's still in that, comparing to other schools statewide, these numbers, as low as they may seem, are actually, again, in the 85 to 90 percentile range for these groups. 8th grade math is tricky. Again, if we're going to pull, we have about 150 students that are accelerated, and many of those students are special education students. They're not taking this exam, so, you know, of the 40% that are left, general ed and regular ed students, it's going to be challenging to find students scoring at the 3 and 4 level, but we're still something we're working on. We've now developed some, again, with 6 through 8, we're developing some additional programs to help address those needs. And you can see here, comparatively to the rest of the state, our students with disabilities and our regular ed students are all performing at a much higher level than the state as a whole. So enough of ELA and math. I'm sure some of the other disciplines get tired of all the focus on those disciplines. So science does have testing still at grades 4 and 8, and we're performing at a very high level there. Our level of proficiency is 97 and 92%, which is very consistent over the last 5 years. Some of our Regents results, you can see the new Common Core ELA exam. We had 99% pass with almost an 80% mastery rate. Both our history exams our students continue to excel on. The U.S. History and Government, to have 85% of our students at a mastery level is just phenomenal. There's schools, you know, better schools that don't even have 85% as a passing rate, and we've got that as a mastery rate. Taking a look at our science exams, you can see, again, our passing rate is very high. And then you'll see, and this phenomenon will continue into the math exams, the chemistry and the physics, the mastery rate drops off quite a bit. You know, one of the things you'll notice if you were to study the scales carefully for the different exams, the way the state sets their cut scores for the earth science and the living environment exams, the threshold to get an 85 is not nearly as high as it is for on the earth science and living environment as it is for chemistry and physics. In fact, for the chemistry and physics exams, there's years you could end up with 85% of the questions correct and still not obtain an 85 as an actual score. So they make it very, very difficult, just the way they set the scale up, to even achieve mastery on chemistry and physics. So it's difficult to compare that back to earth science and living environment. Because you would think that, you know, for the most part, chemistry and physics, those are the higher level exams. It tends to be our higher level students that are taking those exams. So you would think that you'd at least maintain that level of mastery, but it's not the case. And a lot of that has to do with the scaling of the way they scale those. And you'll see the same thing happens with the math exams. They're much more in line with the chemistry and physics exams, and it has to do, again, with the way they set the cut scores. The Algebra 1 exam, the passing score is set about as low as you could possibly go. You actually only needed about 29% of the questions correct last year to get a 65, but to get an 85 was another story. And then the one exam that I'll talk a little bit about is the geometry exam, and you'll see this when we talk about the graduation chart in a second. One of the things that we've tried to do here the last 5 years is get as many of our students as possible through all 3 math exams, which then sets them up to get the Advanced Regents Diploma. So we have a cohort of about 100 students in any given year that traditionally, prior to 5 years ago, were not eligible to take the Algebra 2 Trig exam, or now the Algebra 2 exam, because they just would not get through all of that curriculum. If you recall, we used to have a program where they would take Algebra 1 over a year and a half, Geometry over a year and a half, so now you've got 2 exams. It took you 3 years to do 2 exams. And then if you wanted to take that last exam, you basically had to prepare for that in a year. Well, as you know, the Algebra 2 Trig exam or the new Algebra 2 exam, that's probably the hardest of the 3. Students needed to stretch the first 2, yet we sort of said, well, if you really want to take that exam, you're going to have to cram it in a year. It just wasn't doable. So we now have a program where students are doing Algebra 1 in a year, Geometry in a year, and it's sort of a scaled-down version of that geometry, which then allows them over 2 years to do that Algebra 2 exam. So we now have approximately 100 students taking that Algebra 2 exam over 2 years, whereas in the past, none of those students would have even been attempting that exam. But obviously, by doing that, you've now got students that are, it's going to be a struggle for them to do the geometry exam in 1 year. So that's why you see there is a dip on that geometry exam, and that's because of that cohort of students that traditionally took that exam over a year and a half, that then never even took the last exam, whereas you can see we have an 85% passing rate on that Algebra 2 Trig exam, which that was our final cohort of kids that took it over 2 years, that old exam. So it's proving very successful. We're getting more and more students now are eligible for the Advanced Regents Diploma. We're talking about 100 students that 5 years ago were not able to achieve the Advanced Regents Diploma. And when you're graduating 400 students, have 100 more eligible, to me, that's philosophically, I think we're servicing our students better by taking that approach, knowing that our geometry results might suffer, but giving as many students the opportunity to get that Advanced Regents Diploma as possible. And again, June 2016, the reason for that split is students that were in the 1-year program just took the Algebra 2, students that were in the 2-year program took the Algebra 2 Trig. And last year it was about 70 students. This year we have about 100. So our AP results continue to outperform both the state and worldwide at a pretty substantial margin. You can see we're at about 90%. If you will, passing rate, proficiency rate on those exams, and those are ones that typically are eligible for college credit. It's remained pretty steady over the past 5 years. We had 454 AP students last year that took close to 900 exams. So that's just phenomenal. That's over the last 5 years, that's continued to increase a little bit each year. You can see that we offer a very, very wide range of exams, and our students are doing very well regardless of the discipline. So I'm not going to read this to you, but it's quickly just showing that the range of exams that we have and the success that our students are seeing. And then the final slide in terms of data reporting deals with our graduation summary. If you recall, the way the state does things is they report the graduation based on 4 years. And that's an exact 4 years in June. So you'll see here that we had about 93% of our students from that 2012 cohort graduated on time, with 61% of them getting that Advanced Regents Diploma. Which again, if you were to take, say, ballpark 60 students out of that, that number drops quite drastically. So allowing them to get all 3 of those math exams has really helped push that number up. The one thing I will say is that we did have 4 students graduate in August, so that would push that number closer to 94%. The one chunk that really stands out is that still enrolled one. We have 20 students that were still enrolled as of last June, which is larger than typical, but still enrolled, meaning that most of the time those are special education students that are on a program that takes more than 4 years. It doesn't mean they're never going to graduate, it just means that they're not going to hit that exact 4-year target, which is the way the state calculates things. So in this next June, we'll take a look at this number again and take a look at the 5-year graduation rate, which I think is a much more realistic number when looking at all students. So finally, what are some things that we're going to focus on this year? We're going to continue to support our teachers and our students in ELA and math. We have some very intensive training again going on this year through Teachers College with the units of study, reading and writing. We have a recently retired teacher, Diane McNiven, coming back and providing professional development on a continual basis with our elementary teachers on those units of study. We're going to continue to push problem solving and inquiry in the math classroom and get away from the rote memorization and sort of algorithm-based approach to math. This summer, we spent a lot of time analyzing data and looking at gaps to try to realign our curriculum to best suit the needs of our students. We're providing support through AIS and RTI, and again, I thank the board for their support of our RTI program. It proved to be very successful last year, and we hope to continue that this year, where we're now able to service students grades K through 2, which in the past we were never able to serve. And as you know, early intervention certainly helps keep that gap down and shrink it so that we're not trying to play that catch-up game all along. We are conducting program reviews for many of our programs. This year we'll finish up special education and CTE, and we're going to begin looking at K through 12 ELA and music. We're going to keep refining our assessments. We had quite a few curriculum projects this summer that we're doing that. We're going to support collaborative planning and goal setting based on the assessment data. The Social Studies Department is continuing to look at the K-12 Social Studies framework, and we'll begin transitioning to that. Same goes with science. The new science standards will be released soon, and the teachers have been studying the drafts as they come out, and we'll be looking to incorporate those new standards as they are formalized. And we'll obviously continue to look at ways that we can use technology to enhance our learning. And this year, we're happy to announce that we do have a K-12 computer science cabinet that's going to meet and begin to develop a continuum of computer science K-12. And that can be scary. People think we're going to teach programming to kindergartners, and that's not what it's really all about. Computer science is really broad in terms of it's teaching the problem-solving skills and the logical way of thinking at the really younger ages. And then as they get a little bit older, using some dragging, dropping programming, very elementary ideas so that when they get to the middle school and high school level, they can handle higher level computer science. As you know, we had the NSF grant through Siena with Siena College where we taught a computer science course last year through Siena. This year we actually have 3 sections of that course. And next year we hope to offer sections of AP computer science. We'll be presenting that to Curriculum Council this fall. So we're obviously looking to improve our computer science program as a whole as well. So I know I answered some questions along the way, but are there any final questions? Mike and then Lynn?
Thanks, Dave. That was very comprehensive. I was just curious how the dropout rate this year compared to previous years.
About 0.5% lower. I'm sorry, higher. And we're looking, one of the things that we're doing, and this is, again, a benefit to having a director of counseling now, K-12, is that her and I, we've already begun to look at trends in the types of students that are dropping out, and we'll be able to have a more focused effort on making sure that we're identifying these students early and keeping, we're able to actually, within our Aspen management system now, have different indicators to flag students to help us pick up on these early warnings much sooner and be able to work with these students to hopefully avoid the dropout and even the still enrolled. Try to, 20 students is a lot of students that have enrolled more than 4 years. Are there things we can continue to do to get that number at the 4-year level and not have to extend it past that?
Thank you.
Lynn?
Lynn?
Very impressive, very comprehensive report. A lot of numbers, a lot of statistics, and certainly our students do a great job. But I look at like the 9 through 12 and consider that those scores very legitimate. But how legitimate can we consider the 3 through 8 when whether we're comparing to the state where there was a high level of opt-outs, and we also have.
Yeah,
one.
and looking
I mean,
at
we
the-
don't know which students, how that might have affected the scores. And when you start having 15, 20% of students opting out,
Yeah.
that, to me, could skew the results.
And we did take a look at the students that are opting out, and it's a pretty good mix of students. There's special ed students, there's regular ed students, and then there's sort of your traditional, some of the accelerated students like took the Regents exam in math, did not take the ELA exam, for instance. So I wouldn't say that the numbers are skewed any one way, because it's a pretty good representative population of students that are opting out. It's not one sort of real vocal group of stronger students saying we're going to opt all our kids out, or an overwhelming number of special education students saying we're going to opt our kids out. The numbers, it's pretty split. We looked at it last year and again this year, and it's pretty representative of the general population in terms of who's opting out. There's no one category that's sort of overwhelmingly opt out. So I'm fairly confident that our numbers are sort of a true indication of our population. Whether other schools are seeing that same type of distribution, I don't know. But so basically what we're able to do, though, is we do have enough students taking it that we can take the test data and we can use it to help inform our instruction, so that we're able to make sure that we're not spending too much time on any one topic that in the grand scheme of things isn't all that important in terms of the standards, and make sure that we are spending time on ones that are, because basically the heavily tested topics are obviously the ones that the standards and the state feel are the important ones. So we want to try to make sure that we're using that data to guide that we're spending the appropriate amount of time on each of the standards.
And I just had another quick question. Do we have any staff members in the district that are part of the commissioner's review of the testing
Yes,
program?
Peter Rawich was on the ELA Standards Review Committee, and I was on the Math Standards Review Committee.
Okay, great. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Joanne.
Go ahead, you first.
Okay, just a couple things. One, I also kind of looked at that dropout number. So what is the number of kids that drop out?
I think it was 8
Okay.
out of that cohort.
And I guess I'm sort of curious about, what would it take to have 100% graduation rate? I mean, understanding that there's 20, that it takes a little longer. Because I think, whatever that takes, we should put that, and it sounds like you guys are already thinking about the counseling being possibly a tool to get there. But the thought of, even 8 kids dropping out of high school without completing their degree, is troubling.
So, like I already mentioned, how we're working with the counseling, and the other piece is, as part of our special education program review, taking a look at, are we providing the students a rigorous enough program where they are able to get their program completed in an appropriate amount of time. Now, again, granted, you're always going to have we have students that are here until they're 21 years of age. I think it's sort of unrealistic to think that we're going to get those students to graduate in 4 years. But that doesn't mean we can't take a look at the students that are sort of in that 5 to 6 year range. Are there things we can do to get the 6 year students down to 5 and the 5 years down to 4?
Right, but at least
Yeah.
they're graduating, whereas we have,
Sure.
a little chunk.
Well, again,
that
there's pieces of that puzzle that they are graduating, they're just not graduating in 4. So like, we just had 4 students graduate in August, they're not showing up on this report.
Right.
They might have been missing one class, they completed it over during a summer school, say, and then they graduated. But that number doesn't count for us.
Okay, but the dropout number are
The-
kids that just
Those
drop
are
out.
kids that
and
physically leave. And
disappear.
sometimes, again, part of it has to do with, Bruce Turk and I did a lot of time actually combing through the data, because we have to be very careful the way we code students when they enter and leave our district too, because that's the way things are reported to the state. So if we have students leave the district, say, and it's not coded correctly, say that they went to another district, that ends up counting against us as a dropout. So that's another thing that Bruce Turk and I are taking a close look at, making sure that our data truly is accurate too.
Okay. And then the other question, it sounds like, grades 3 and 5 are sort of the kind of bumpy spots that we want to do a better job, and some of that may be, especially with 5th grade, the nature of the test, because statewide,
Mhm.
there was a little bit of an anomaly. But if you look at that slide 7, where you look at, we did really well, 60% on average at that 3 and 4 level, you know, I look at those 1 and 2 levels and think, okay, that's a pretty significant percentage that, you know, of kids that aren't doing well. I assume that some of those kids are in, you know, RTI programs or other kinds of programming to help them kind of come along.
The level 1 students for sure.
Okay.
The cutoff for RTI/AIS at the middle school, the state sets that usually within the level 2 range. It's not at the top of the level 2 range. It's usually actually more towards the bottom of the level 2 range.
So those level 2 kids are kids that clearly need extra help that aren't getting.
They're getting extra help. They're not getting the pull-out extra help.
They're not getting the
extra
pull-out.
supports within the classroom,
Okay.
but they're not getting help where they're being pulled out of the classroom, say. But I think if you look at our level 1 numbers, I mean, the level 5 to me is very alarming, but the other numbers, you know, are fairly consistent. That's another thing that kind of jumps out, though, is how could the 5th grade in both ELA and math be that far off all of the other? And that's what the state's sort of looking at. The percentage of level 1s is just much, much higher than you would anticipate based on the other numbers.
Right, I guess my question would be, and it's just sort of a question for thinking about, but those level 2 kids, those are pretty sizable percentages. So those are kids that are struggling, but not necessarily getting pulled out for RTI or whatever. So what would it take for us as a district to invest in some sort of special programming that helps them? You know, it's great that we have great 60s and 70s up in the middle there, the 3s and 4s.
I mean, if you wanted them to receive the same services that the level 1s are receiving, I mean, you can see those numbers are on average, you know, 3 times higher, so we'd have to have 3 times the staff in order to be able to pull, if you wanted to use the pull-out model.
The other thing I would be cautious
Yeah.
about in just looking at percentages level 2 is, remember, the state has shifted those scales multiple times over the years. And many of those students who are now in level 2, 3 years ago would have been level 3.
Right.
And if you look over the long term, most of those students who are scoring, if not all of those students who are scoring level 2, are passing the algebra exams, are passing the geometry exams, and going on to complete what Dave was talking about is the, 3 years of math. So I think that just looking at the percentage, it looks high, and I'm not saying some of those students don't need assistance and they get it based on other measures. But when you just look at that actual percentage from the state, I think you need to be cautious, because literally one question on one of those exams can cause a student to drop down into the lower level or a higher level. So it's not, the percentages are hard to just look at without looking at the scales.
But
Right.
aren't we servicing more with the RTI program?
Yes.
We
Oh,
should
absolutely.
be servicing more than what we were before with what the state just mandated at the lower level too.
Well, because we're picking up K1, 2, which
Okay.
that's where we're getting the extra service. But to Jody's point, if we take a look at the ELA exam, for instance, we have 80% of our students are mastering that exam. Whereas if you go back to the elementary and middle level, the proficiency rate's only 60%. So it's hard to believe that many students are making drastic gains all of a sudden when they transition from 8th to 9th and then through 11th grade. Those exams clearly are not true predictors of how they're performing in high school. And this is the Common Core exam. It's supposed to be more rigorous than the old exam, and our students are doing far better on this exam than they were back on these exams.
Right.
And if you
okay.
looked at that cohort of students who just took that Common Core ELA exam, I think at that year when they were in 8th, 7th, or 8th grade, I think our proficiency rate was maybe 40-some%.
Right.
So
Okay.
that they really make that much gains.
Right.
So that's where I think we need to be cautious on just
Right.
looking at
Well,
percentages.
that just added ammunition to the parents who opt out their kids, saying these tests, clearly there's some question about the validity, let alone the value, so just.
That wasn't my intent.
I know it wasn't
Right,
your
yeah.
intent, but it was the first thing I thought, if I'm, questioning both the, the value of these tests, and you make a very compelling argument, well, how can you make up this much gain if, once they hit 9th grade, they're doing so well? you know, that illustrates kind of what is being talked about in, you know, in parents' living rooms all across the country about, you know, the value of these tests and what does it mean? And what's, you know.
They've also increased, like, third grade tests are now equivalent to fifth grade tests.
True.
So
Yeah.
the standards have gone up, so it might take several years to actually catch up.
But it's
to-
hard to tell because the state keeps moving the cut scores, and then now they've changed testing vendors, so you don't, you know, the test could be, so this year, what they rewrote all of the tests. Pearson originally had written the tests. They brought a whole bunch of teachers in to rewrite all of Pearson's questions. This new vendor then put this test together. So you can't even really compare from year to year because it's not the same, you know, level of exam. Then they move the scores around. So there was actually, if you look at, because they do this raw score to scale score conversion that is sort of convoluted, and if you look at percentage of raw score points needed to achieve a level 3 or 4, that changes every year. So even though the proficiency rates appear to go up, but the percentage of raw score points needed is going down. So it's really, and if you look at the initial data report, they said, it says basically, please don't compare from year to year because you can't do that. Well, then what's the point in putting all of this data out there if you can't use it to compare? It's frustrating.
So I have, are you?
No, I'm done.
My questions are always number related. On the English Common Core, which it was our first year, what was the average compared to the old regions? If you know off the top of your head.
I don't remember the number, I just remember it was higher.
It was higher.
It was much,
So it
yeah.
went up. And then with the Algebra 2 trig, the same thing, that number?
Much higher. I mean, we've never had the Algebra 2, the old Algebra 2 trig exam. We've never had every student get through that.
Well, not that passing, I was just wondering
Well,
if the average.
the lowest score was a 71, so
Okay.
our average was
It's remained the same.
quite a bit higher than it
Okay.
used to be.
Thank you, that's it.
I have, just one question.
Yes.
Do you do exit interviews with students who are dropping out? Does anyone ever talk to them and like one-on-one and ask why?
The guidance.
Counselors do.
Counselors do
counselors,
exit interviews?
Typically, if a student, you know, goes to drop out, providing they come in and talk about it, there would be conversations with the principal counselor about, you know, obviously trying to encourage a student to stay in school, or if not, what's an alternative pathway that might be acceptable when
And some
when
do
we can.
the alternative pathways, and it's, you're still considered a
Right,
dropout.
Okay.
So in other words, if you decide to do like the GED program at Hudson Valley and then continue on at Hudson Valley, you could end up with your 2-year degree, but you're considered a dropout because you did your GED.
Any other questions for Dave?
Nope, good.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have the potential bond project discussion. I didn't say Chris because it didn't say Judy's because.
Tag teaming.
Oh, okay. Greg, the staff didn't want to listen to you? No. Well, we still got some other folks here for you, so.
I'm Greg Nolte, the Director of Facilities, as you already know, because I've been up here for 6 consecutive board meetings talking about a potential bond project. Tonight will be my shortest presentation.
Thank you. Any questions for Greg? No.
Piggybacking on Ms. Monroe and Mr. Hurst, we have one of the district goals is value, and tonight's presentation supports that. Part of the bond, this work is going to help maintain the district's facility and make sure that they are in good working condition, provide suitable educational space for our students and for the broader community. Tonight's objectives are brief, basically a wrap-up session. We're going to talk about some of the dates for the community forums, the overall project and the project timeline, and then as well, if there's any additional community comment, we'll talk about that. We continue to have a great website here. A lot of information is on this. There's a full list of the 111 projects, proposed projects for this project, And as well, we have the 5-year facilities plan. These are the other resources. Throughout this process, we've been receiving and responding to community comments, but for the most part, things have been quiet. Based upon the addition of the high school irrigation system that we talked about at the last board meeting, like I said, we have a total of 111 projects, and that our total now is $32,165,551. So basically, we're coming to the point where it's kind of like a last call for any changes. Are there any other additional comments that we need to talk about or proceed on? I think is what we kind of wanted to do, at least at this meeting.
I think Joanna already asked the question, but we're not getting any additional feedback through the website or any comments from the community on anything that's been presented so far, correct?
No, not since the last board meeting. We responded at the last board meeting regarding a few of the comments that we received, but other than that, none. Quiet. Okay, so I'm going to tag team with Judy.
So as we noted at the last meeting, one of the goals that we try to do is make sure that we can even out our debt service in a tax cap world. And we have a series of bonds that will be fully repaid starting in the 21-22 fiscal year. That's a $4.2 million reduction in debt service based on our existing debt. So not only do we have the capacity to fund this project, because right now, with the project at the $32.165 million amount, that estimated debt service would only be about $2.2 million. So you're still going to see a reduction in your overall debt service, but it will be, I mean, lower is good, but it's close enough to what we would consider stable so that there shouldn't be any negative impact to the taxpayers with the issuance of the debt associated with that project. If we were to approve the project at the $32.1 million amount, a certain amount of that is going to be aidable by New York State. When they apply our percentage of building aid to that, close to 69% of that project would be aidable. That reduces our local share. The cost of that local share for a $250,000 home at most would be about $40 a year. But again, with that reduction in debt service, assuming we didn't have any other increases in costs that weren't otherwise offset with aid, it would likely be significantly below that $40 per $250,000 home. We also, remember, have the $4.9 million that is within the district's capital reserve, so we would use those resources to reduce the amount of bonding that would be required. So,
I have a quick question. How much is the 4.9 million of the capital, is that the entire amount that's in there? What's the amount that's
yes,
there?
right now it's $4.9 million.
So you're proposing or recommending that that be basically the entirety be taken?
Right,
Okay.
that's what we created the reserve for, and if we have a project that is approved, remember that would require not only board approval, but voter approval as well as part of the bond.
When we established that reserve, as I recall, was it a 10-year reserve?
10-year reserve.
So could we start putting in more money next year under the current resolution or the current
Yeah.
authority the board has given to that?
It has a 10-year life, and
Okay.
it has a maximum $10 million allowed to be placed within the reserve.
Okay.
Okay, so we have been firming up the timeline with each, excuse me, with each meeting. We have a facilities forum, which we're going to present at the next board meeting on September 21st. We have what we're calling a community outreach at the public library on September 22nd at 10:30 in the morning. And the goal would be that the board adopts the scope of work and a seeker resolution on October 5th, okay? So let's just talk about seeker. Seeker is a process that anytime that we have projects, we have to determine whether or not there's any environmental impacts, okay? We are in the process of doing it, our consultants are. We don't think we really have any, but we have to go through the process. We have to invite involved agencies to comment on what they think, and then if there is any mitigating measures because of a project such as the field work at the high school and the middle school that triggered some of this review, then we would have to include those mitigating measures in our bond scope. Okay, so this is the exact same process that we went through with the 2013 bond. Okay, so you would see a bond resolution as well as a seeker resolution on October 5th. And then from that point, there's a 45-day settling period notice, so we could have a public vote as early as November 29th or December 6th. And I believe those are Tuesdays. Assuming that the community approves this project, we would get going right away on the design, which we're estimating is going to take about 9 months. And then once it's designed, then we submit it to SED, and we are truly guessing at this point that SED is going to take 10 months to review. They are in flux with some changes in administration, so we really don't know how long, okay? But based upon some current workloads, they're averaging about 10 months or so. We talked about this last time, but we have missed this mark of potentially having a summer 2018 construction period, knowing that we wouldn't get approval until July or so of 2018, which is not a good time to bid out projects. So we would probably hold off potentially till January, February, when contractors are looking for their year's work to actually bid it. We haven't gotten that far, but we may consider multiple bidding, depending upon what we end up with as far as the project and the potential phases. And then we might start as early as April 2019. Questions on that?
Is there any way to, the design period would be definitely the 9 months you anticipate, and we save time on that?
We will push. We have the same architects, however, some new engineers and consultants on board. We changed the team around a little bit. We will push it as best as we can. We know what we want. We have some complicated projects like the auditorium that I don't want to rush. We have to make sure that our documents are good to avoid change orders down the road because something was missed or not coordinated by our designers.
Can we determine tonight which of those 2 dates to have the vote? Or does it make any difference at this point?
It doesn't matter. You can wait until the next meeting to have a public forum, or you could tentatively decide tonight which of those dates you prefer. We can include it with the public forum. It doesn't make difference in regards to notification, right, Judy?
No, there's no difference in terms of the 45-day estoppel period that we would have to wait, but I am still waiting to hear back from Albany County, because remember, they have general elections in November. We're using their machines now. So I will remind them of our request tomorrow, and I will let you know at the next meeting on that.
Judy, before you leave, on the capital reserve, is there any downside to our sort of emptying out the account? Is there any reason
No.
why we should keep some?
No, the reserve is there for the purpose of lowering our local share on the bonds. It exists. You see how long it takes for both the review and approval of the project, so I don't see any reason why you would not draw down on that full amount.
So if there were an unforeseen emergency, we would probably take additional funds out of like the fund balance, the undesignated fund balance, or where would we get the funds if something?
We have unexpected things that happen all the time, so
Yes.
that's just part
Let's
of
say
managing the
major.
$92 million
But
budget.
we would still need a public vote to get it out if we.
Right.
Oh,
You have
yeah.
to have a public vote.
Right,
to
right, but
use
we
it.
would have we have funds, other funds available if,
Yeah.
let's
we-
say, a major mishap happened.
Insurance.
You would know about it and would be taking appropriate budget action, modification if needed. Yeah.
And
So-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Joanne, so whoever's.
No, so we definitely missed, were we talking about the summer of 2018 originally?
I think that was a
That was
hope,
our
but
hope.
when you tee up all of the critical path items that have to happen, it wasn't a realistic hope, I think,
Okay.
is the way to put that.
Okay, so waiting to the summer basically of 2019 is not gonna, we're not gonna lose much in waiting another year from your vantage point.
Well, we don't really have a choice.
We don't have a
here.
choice at this point.
You know, we're going to hit the market when every contractor's going to be hungry.
Okay.
At the beginning of January or February. We're not going to rush the project. Yeah, I had a very aggressive schedule when we first started talking about this.
Okay.
5 months ago, whatever it was. And we were hoping, but, you know, we need to take our time with this.
Right, and well, part of it was, you know, we kept saying we wanted to get the community's input. We got very little community input. And we have 2 additional venues and opportunities for community input in addition to, you know, board meetings like this. I mean, I hope some people show up at these meetings, you know,
At
by
least
the
supporting it,
lack.
right?
What?
At least supporting it.
Yeah, at least supporting it, but, you know, you may not get that because I think people are not necessarily blasé, but I think people expect that we're a big district and we do projects and we plan and we, you know, pay down the, you know, the big one and then, so I wouldn't call it, you know, apathy or necessarily that people are blasé. I think it's the expectation of a district like this that we're going to do stuff like this. So I know that that was one of the reasons that this time frame, while aggressive, kind of got pushed out. And I certainly hope that it's worthwhile, given that we've built in that extra time. And we've gotten like, you know, if the website is any indication, we've gotten like 2 you know, comments through the website, which is the most simple way for people to give their input. And they were pretty minor comments, you know. Take a look at the middle school lacrosse fields or something, you know. So anyway, but if you guys are comfortable, obviously, and we don't have any alternative at this point.
I will say, I think it was worth it, though. I mean, even if we didn't get the feedback, so that people couldn't come back and say, you rushed through this, we can go back and say, we had these many meetings and these many opportunities. So for me, it was worth it. I know we may have lost some time. The tax impact, you're estimating at 40, did you say $40?
No more than $40
Per
on a
year.
$250,000 home. Probably less than that, but I wanted to put the worst-case scenario out there, just so that you would have an order of magnitude
Okay.
as to what could be expected.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Judy? Okay.
So we'll
Yeah, I was gonna
send
say.
some SNNs about
Yeah.
having a
Well,
public.
is there consensus from the board that we're fine with this timeline? And do we want to decide a vote date tonight?
Well, no, we can't, because Judy has to.
Okay,
hear
but
from
we
all
could
the
always say
county.
we prefer the 29th over the 6th or not.
I prefer the 29th, only because they're predicting a very rough winter, so in case it starts snowing early. I don't want people to say,
That's
oh,
the
we
weekend
couldn't
of
get.
Thanksgiving?
Yeah,
Have to have a snow day.
Who's after?
I think the 29th is better as well.
I would say,
29th.
I mean, the snowbirds usually
Anyone
stay
have any?
until after
Well,
Christmas, but
29th or the 6th, it's the same weather. I mean, it's only
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
6 days, so.
I just think the earlier the
I don't think, you know, you could have a storm either day. You're rolling the dice.
Do
on
the
that.
29th and a snow date of the 6th.
Yeah.
Can we build
I don't
in
know,
a
can you
snow
do
day
that
for the-
legally?
I don't believe so, but I'll check
No.
with council.
29th, the 29th is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, and then the following, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then our next presentation and final presentation tonight is the Town of Bethlehem Conservation Easement Exemption. Just some background on this. The board had previously discussed this and took a vote on it. At that time, I know I was one who raised the concern about the easement only being available for landowners in the town of Bethlehem. And our district actually encompasses both the town of Bethlehem, and part of New Scotland. And we've gotten some information and clarification that the exemption could be applied strictly to the town of Bethlehem parcels and not be an impact on the parcels within New Scotland. So we are going to have another discussion about that and a presentation from the town of Bethlehem and Rob Leslie and Supervisor Clarkson.
Well, I'm Supervisor Clarkson. I was just going to introduce Rob Leslie. You've already broached sort of the big topic which brought us back. We want to thank you for reconsidering opting into this exemption. The issue that President Downey mentioned, that the exemption can only be available in the town of Bethlehem, and yet your district overhangs both halves, is really the major change that took place. We have a solution to that, but I want to first give credit to she who identified the solution, and that would be Judith Kehoe. She's working with our town attorney, Jim Potter. We found that there was already a section of state law that will address this perfectly well, and I apologize for not having been aware of it in the first instance, but it was very helpful to have that help. And we do have Doug LaGrange here. So there he is, the supervisor of the town, New Scotland. So welcome. And Rob is going to give you a presentation. For some of you, it will be the second time around, but you can give us signals if you need us to speed up or slow down, and we'll go from there. But I know there are a couple of people who'd like to discuss it. And just overall, thank you for having us back again.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, John. As John mentioned, I'm Rob Leslie, Director of Economic Development and Planning for the town of Bethlehem. I'm going to provide a brief overview. For some, it'll be a refresher, since you were on the board last time we were here. Others, this might be some new information. So big picture, what is the conservation easement exemption? The exemption essentially offers property owners a reduction in their property taxes in exchange for a commitment to preserve undeveloped land. Essentially, if a property owner has a piece of property that is 5 acres or more, located in the Bethlehem Central School District, or essentially located in the town of Bethlehem, they can apply to the Town Conservation Easement Review Board for a conservation easement exemption. The board would look at it from a standpoint of, does this property provide open space value? Does it provide open space benefit to the town? And if so, the landowner can receive a reduction in the assessed value on their property. So essentially, the exemption provides an opportunity, and we feel a vital tool for the town to help maintain the character that we all enjoy. We've got developed areas in town, and we have rural areas in town, and I think part of that mix has attracted some of us and most of us to the town, and those of us who've been here for a long time, appreciate and want to keep some of that rural character and that open space and that agricultural land in our community. One way to do that is for landowners to consider applying for this program. But the main item that really needs to be looked at here is for the school district to consider participation in the program. And so that's why we're here again tonight to ask that you reconsider opting into the program. Essentially, each of the taxing jurisdictions of the town, the school district, and the county have to opt in for the program to be effective. Right now, the town participates in the program, but without the involvement of the school district, we've heard from landowners that there really is no benefit for them from the financial standpoint to consider essentially putting a halt or putting the brakes on them considering any type of development on their property. So where have we come from? In 2009, the New York State Legislature added Section 491 to the tax law. This allowed two municipalities in the state to participate in this conservation easement exemption program. Those are the towns of Elma and Orchard Park in Erie County. The town of Bethlehem learned about this program sometime around 2014 and said, let's apply for participation. And therefore, Senator Breslin and Assemblywoman Fahey sponsored legislation successfully, and Bethlehem was awarded participation in that program in 2014. Subsequently, the town board opted into the program, and anyone who is wants to apply for a conservation easement on their property with the town right now can receive a reduction in the assessed value on their taxes. And how does that work? Well, essentially, the minimum term for a conservation easement is 15 years. So somebody may choose to opt in, choose to apply for a 15-year conservation easement on the following terms. So 15 to 29 years, the landowner would receive a 50% exemption. 30 to 49 years, the owner would receive a 75% exemption. And then you could see, based on the table, it scales up finally to a perpetual conservation easement. The owner would receive a 90% exemption on the assessed value on the land. And so in order for this to work, we've established a Conservation Easement Review Board. This was established by the town board after the board opted into the program. And what happens is we have an application, landowner can apply, fill out the application online. They can also come into town hall and work with planning staff for assistance on filling out the application. We can provide them with mapping and tax parcel information as they put together their application. Planning staff serves as staff to the Conservation Easement Review Board, who meets on a as-needed basis. There's 5 members of the board. So essentially, the review board would accept an application, determine if the proposal would be a benefit to the town, and then would essentially make a recommendation to the town board for the board's consideration. Once the town board receives the conservation board's recommendation, they would hold a public hearing and then can take action on approval of the conservation easement exemption. Once that easement exemption is approved by the town board, an agreement is signed between the landowner and the town, and that agreement is recorded with the property deed in the Albany County Clerk's office. So it becomes a legally binding agreement and runs with the land for the extent of the easement. So if the property owner decides to sell the property, that easement exemption will remain in effect for the term that was assigned to the easement agreement. If there's a violation of the terms and conditions of the easement, a penalty will be applied. The landowner will be required to pay back the taxes abated, as well as a penalty for the violation. So we feel this program is vital to achieving some Bethlehem conservation goals. It's certainly consistent with the goals of the 2005 comprehensive plan. A lot of discussion at that time about the loss of open land to development. Respondents to survey questions indicated that they would support the town purchasing land or through conservation easements as a means to preserve land. So we feel this tool is certainly something that is consistent with the comprehensive plan goal of conserving open space lands. We've had several groups look at this, from the Citizens Advisory Committee on Conservation, which recommended term conservation easements to the town board, which is what this is. And then we've had the Open Space Technical Advisory Working Group work to put together some of the guiding principles, the guidebook, the application, to provide the assistance necessary to get the program up and running. So we've taken a look at what properties are eligible, and so this gives everyone an indication of what the impact could be. So what I'm showing you here is a map of potential eligible properties in the Bethlehem School District. This results in about 105 parcels that are eligible and representing 3,500 acres. These properties represent land that is either currently vacant, perhaps it's in agricultural use, or perhaps it's considered residential vacant, and maybe there's a property that has 20 to 30 acres with one house on it. That land is considered residential vacant land. It's coded as residential vacant land, and that property owner could also apply for the program. So what is the impact to the school district? Well, we think it will be minimal. The exemption will not affect the tax levy, and will have a minor and mostly negligible redistribution impact. The issue dating back to, I think, 2014 that was of concern was that if there's a loss of assessed value in Bethlehem, that's going to affect the town of New Scotland taxpayers, that they would have to take on the loss of the assessed value, and there'd be a burden on them. As a result, as John mentioned, we took a further look and identified that there's an add-back provision in New York State tax law that would allow only Bethlehem residents to be impacted by the loss of assessed value. So town of Bethlehem residents would take on the additional cost as a result of the loss in assessed value. So as I mentioned, we have about 105 properties that would be eligible, and we've taken a look at what the potential impacts could be on somewhat of a low to high range scale. If you take a look at the option where we have about, the first bullet here represents where if we had about 20 properties participating, and we expect this to occur maybe in the next 5 to 7 years or so, representing a loss of $500,000 to the total assessment within the town school district here, that would result in an additional $1 per taxpayer on the average taxpayer as a result of that participation of 20 properties. if you take a look at the extreme end and you look at the example of, well, what if all 105 properties participate at the 15-year minimum term? This would result in a 50% reduction in assessed value. What you're looking at would be an impact of about $6 per taxpayer. And we don't expect all 105 properties to participate. We just don't think it's possible. I think, landowners have, some landowners have conservation goals in mind. Other landowners are using the property as for agricultural purpose, but at some point it's their nest egg. They want to sell it for development, and they're going to receive payment for the value of the land. So we don't expect the full 105 properties to ever participate. And then finally, we looked at extreme case scenario where all properties participate on a perpetual conservation easement. So the easement runs forever with the land. That would have an impact of about $12 per taxpayer. Now, essentially, that would mean that virtually no more development would occur in the Bethlehem School District. So I don't think anyone believes that would ever happen. Essentially, that's the worst case scenario. We don't think it's ever going to happen. But if it did happen, you're essentially looking at the conservation benefits. Well, we've preserved 3,500 acres of land. That means less homes being built. That means less traffic on our roadways. That means less school students to service. So the cost of development essentially would be abated by those property owners participating in the program. So we think that on average, we'll see in the first maybe 5 to 7 years, maybe 20 or so property owners taking advantage of it or applying for it. But we don't see the likelihood of the extreme measure where all properties are taking advantage of it. But there would be a benefit if they did. Essentially it'd be a $12 impact on the taxpayer, but we receive more value in less traffic, less financial impacts on the school district to servicing the students, the town maintaining the roads and infrastructure and sewer and water of all that. And we benefit from the open space value that land provides from an environmental standpoint, but also from a quality of life standpoint as well. So we're certainly willing to report annually back to the board as far as what properties have applied, who has been granted easements, what those values are. And the board is always, at its discretion, can always opt out of the program. Certainly those landowners who have signed agreement and that has been, filed with the county clerk, those landowners will continue to receive the exemption, but anyone new coming in may not have the benefit of the school taxes if you choose to opt out at some point. And then Judy, go ahead.
I think one of the other important things to highlight in terms of these assumptions that we made is we assume that there was no growth in the overall assessed values. That has not been our experience in the last few years. So to the extent you have some growth, even if it's modest, that would lower those estimates. We also assume that there was no change in the levy amount. So it's important that you know how we came up with these calculations. Rob had done
Thank
the
you.
calculations, and I had reviewed them to
And you're good with it? That was
confirm.
going to be one of my first questions.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes.
Great, thanks for, good points, Judy, thanks for chiming in. And then in summary, what we've learned over the past, year and a half is that, anyone who's interested in participating in the program, feels that the exemption is really ineffective if we don't have participation from the school district. That is a good portion of taxes paid by the landowners. And so, it's really important that the school district, opts in to really for the exemption to be effective. An item I just want to point out that we took a look at was dating back to late 2014 when we first introduced this to the school district. Since that time, about 300 acres of land have either been approved for development, under construction already, or applied for development. And so, it gives you a sense of what can happen in a year and a half, 2 years. That landowners are making decisions on developing their property and, do they develop, do they not? We feel this tool is just one other vital item that gives them an option that, may slow growth and may, withhold it for 15-year minimum or 30 years, but that it gives them an option rather than going to development. It gives them some type of financial benefit to, to withholding development for a time, and maybe it's perpetual. So with that, I could open it up for questions and comments.
What is the penalty if someone decides that they're going to sell? And you said that the taxes have to be paid back, plus there's a penalty.
Correct. It's a repayment as being equal to 5 times the taxes saved in the last year, plus interest of 6% per year compounded annually, not exceeding 5 years.
And we should say we don't
That's the-
expect this to happen for a couple of reasons. One is that you can't sell your land for development if you have an easement recorded with a deed saying you can't develop. No one's going to buy it. Secondly, this penalty is identical to what we now have for the agricultural value program, which has been in existence ever since it was acted by the state. We've got about 80 agricultural exemptions or value exemptions in the town, and none of them have ever violated. The owners are aware of the terms. They do not violate the agreement, and that's been the experience to date.
Right.
Just a follow-up question to Jonathan. So would the school district get a share of that penalty or repayment?
Yes.
Yeah, yep, exactly.
You get precisely your share. The law directs our assessor to give it back to you. It's never happened, but were it to happen.
And just to be clear, if I heard you correctly, you said that if the district in the future opts out, that any existing easements would remain?
Correct. They've signed an agreement with the town, and with the time the school district was part of the program. You wouldn't be able to remove them from, they have a signed agreement filed with the deed of the land.
And the same penalty applies?
Yes.
Yes, exactly. The penalty still runs, yes.
The other, just a note on the reporting too, which Rob mentioned, we intend to report annually. It'll be useful for you, it'll be useful for our citizens because they're interested in conservation. But another purpose of that is Pat Fahey and I have had discussions with the Assembly Real Property Tax Committee, and the chair of that would like to see if this program works here. Perhaps it could be expanded elsewhere. Right now, as Rob detailed, there are only 3 municipalities in the state allowed to do it. So in the future, if other towns, similar to Bethlehem in character, wanted to opt in, we'd like to have that option. So our intent is to report back to the New York State Legislature, tell them about our experience, how it's working, and there's a tremendous amount of interest in it. The extreme example that was given, where it was a $12 per taxpayer impact, you could say that's the worst case scenario, the highest impact, but it's also the best case. Because all the calls that I get as supervisor from residents is, can't you just stop all development? And the answer is, no, we can't. There are laws. Landowners have rights. What this program does is allows landowners at their option to opt out of development, and at their option receive instead lower taxes. So the town doesn't have to take money out up front. The residents get what they want, which is less development. The landowners get less taxes. The school district, depending, and you're a very popular, wonderful school district with a great education, and you are growing, you have grown, but do you want to continue to grow at a rapid rate, or is it better not to? All of those benefits will accrue, and so all of that will be covered in our annual reports, hopefully if the program, with your help, gets up and running and is able to be successfully rolled out to some number of properties.
Matt?
Yes,
Oh,
Joanne.
sorry. Has the town done any analysis of what the cost of development actually translates to on, like you mentioned, roads and services and school district? Like, is there an estimate, or is there some proxy?
Yeah, I think, we haven't done it specifically for Bethlehem, but I've looked at other research done by American Farmland Trust and some other entities. Cost of community service studies have been done in general. And the data I've seen shows that for every dollar paid in taxes, it costs $1.15 to provide services to that home. This is on a single-family home. And then the scale changes as you go down to commercial, industrial property, and then all the way down to agricultural open space, where the payment of $1 receiving in services is
Okay.
75 cents. So single-family homes is the most draw on services as you get down the scale to agricultural and open space.
Okay.
Anyone else? Yes, Chairman.
What other vehicles are in place to control or manage development in the town besides this?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, we've had a Citizens Advisory Committee on Conservation that has identified other recommendations. One was I wouldn't say recommendations, but other tools that could be applied. One was a mortgage recording tax the town may wish to consider. It didn't get any, it didn't get any weight. There's other non-for-profit organizations. Mohawk Hudson Land Conservancy, is another group that can purchase property or provide conservation easements on land as a way to control growth. But, for the most part, without financial incentives for a landowner to not develop, other tools are really minimal to really help control growth. We've got a zoning law in place and zoning districts in place that gives landowners rights to develop. Some have rights to develop for commercial purposes. Some have rights to develop for residential purposes. But each land is zoned for a specific use, and those lands have rights for development. So as of this point, our tools are limited. There is state funding out there from New York State Ag and Markets, from DEC for purchasing open space lands, but those lands come at a high cost. Lands are selling for millions of dollars, and that's a cost that certainly the town is not able to fork into its funds to purchase.
I think there's another way to answer this, and I wasn't sure how you meant. What other tools do we have to control development and limit it? We do have just about every creative land use, zoning, and approval technique that you'll find in towns across New York State. We have a conservation easement program. We have a plan unit development. All of these ways are tools to control development, hopefully preserve some open space. That's just through the land use regulation. So we do that. But one of the things that's hardest for me to explain to people, I mentioned many of our public would simply say, no more development. Can't you say no? And legally, a town can. It's not that Bethlehem has chosen not to do this. Legally, our options are limited. You can have a comprehensive plan. You can have zoning. You can use the other techniques we've talked about. You can have a conservation easement if you're so empowered as we are. You can buy conservation easements. And all of these things are possible, but this tool allows us to do it at the landowner's option without taking money out of top. And it really adds out of pocket. It adds really a new and a creative way to really help staunch the flow of development, which is our very strong impression is what the majority of our residents would want.
And one specific tool that is in the current town code is conservation subdivisions. This is where a property owner can cluster development on a portion of the property with the goal of maintaining larger open space on the remaining part of the property. So it does provide a benefit for conserving open space. However, you still need to have development on the property in order to get the open space. This conservation easement tool essentially would not allow development for a minimum of 15 years, going on to perpetual. So while we do have some tools, this really would be a real effective program immediately for landowners to participate.
Anyone else? Okay. I would open it up to the floor at this time, if the board doesn't mind, before we would decide to take a vote to get comments. Anyone would like to address the board on this particular topic? If you'd come forward and state your name at the microphone.
Just lift the microphone out if you want.
Hi, my name is Mark King. I'm the Executive Director of the Mohawk Hudson Land Conservancy, and we operate in the town of Bethlehem. We conserve land across the three-county area, Albany, Schenectady, and Montgomery County, and currently hold conservation easements on about 2,000 acres, and have been doing this for the last 25 years or so. And I'd like to strongly encourage you to pursue this mechanism. It's very complementary to what we do. It to me, is the fiscal impact when you talk about these gigantic bonds and these gigantic expenses. The expense of this is absolutely minimal, and the gain is tremendous. You have a town that is very highly developed and very little open space left. There just is really no downside to doing this. And I think it's the numbers that Rob presented are actually highly unrealistic, and as he points out, because most landowners aren't going to do this, but any landowners you can get at this point in the town of Bethlehem to preserve their land and not develop is a real gain. And as John put it, it's a success to get all 3,500 acres. It's a success you probably will never see, but it is one to strive for because there is very little left. And also, Rob mentioned the cost of development studies, and there are just a slew of those studies out there. Everyone comes up with the same thing. He mentioned the $1.15 number. There are lots of other numbers that are even higher. Residential development is extremely costly, and this gives you one tool to help deal with that. So I hope you will seriously consider it and vote in a positive direction. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening. My name is Sam Messina, and I'm a former supervisor in Bethlehem. And I was here 10 months or nearly a year ago when this proposal was brought before the board, spoke for it in that evening presentation. And I too was not aware of the inconsistency of the application of the proposal to some of the folks that would be impacted but not have, if you will, a decision on this. So I think the board did the right thing at that time by saying this needs to be explored more. Government doesn't always operate to go the next step, to solve problems when they're confronted with the first one. In this case, Supervisor Clarkson, Assemblywoman Fahey, Senator Breslin, working with Judy and others, looked at an alternative to use state legislation to solve this problem. That's good government, and good government that I think should be considered and be a basis for action tonight. The other thing is, on the local waterfront revitalization program that the supervisor has started, I kind of did some independent study on, are there any silver bullets out there where a town would have an option to, in sort of large terms, preserve more open space? There really aren't any. You quickly get into the vicinity of a taking, which is legally unacceptable. So it's relatively small things that can add to the bigger picture. The conservation easement is frankly one of the best tools in the portfolio because it's based on willing landowners. The last thing I'd like to say is when people come to this town of Bethlehem, when they spend their lives here, when they have their children go to school here, when they invest their time to be volunteers on boards or participate in other ways, they do it for a lot of reasons. An excellent school system is one of those. Another one is that we do have open space in this town. So by supporting this initiative for open space, the way I view it is you're complementing a fine school district, which is attractive, along with open space. So I appreciate your reconsideration of this, and I hope you'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Good evening, I'm Paul Tick. I spoke to you last time around. You all know I support this, very much appreciate John and Rob and Pat Fahey all going back to drawing board and looking at the concerns that were brought up last time around. One other point that might be important to be made is that from the research I've read, when a town has more open space, property values go up. So if there's any concern about a few dollars here that some people might have to pay for this proposal, in the long run, people's property values go up. When they do retire, if they move out of town, if they sell, they're in better shape after all. That's not necessarily the only reason to support this, but it is in case of a concern that everybody should be aware of. The other reasons, of course, as spelled out, are quality of life and the future of our whole community. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments.
I'm Bob Gordon, board member of Friends of Five Rivers and past president of Friends. Five Rivers is a state facility that overlaps Bethlehem and New Scotland, and it's well regarded as one of the gems of the capital region. And if we could expand the concept of having this open space, that the 453 acres of Five Rivers could expand, not specifically of Five Rivers, but the concept of having open space such as that, this is a great contribution to the quality of life in the town. And I know a couple of people have mentioned about quality of life, but I think it's so important that if the board approves this program of the easement, that will go a long way to improving the quality of life in the town. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Maureen Cunningham. I'm on the board of the Friends of Five Rivers. I'm also on the Conservation Easement Board. I wear another hat in my day job as the director of the Hudson River Watershed Alliance. I was waiting to see what my colleagues would say, and to add to what they've said today, many of you probably know there were hearings going on with regard to water quality in Hoosick Falls. 2 years ago in New York State, we weren't really talking about drinking water quality, but I have to say open space and preserving lands, and they could be adjacent to water bodies. This is an important way we protect our water and air quality. So it's not just about quality of life, it's actually the quality for our kids of our water and land. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Judy Abbott. I live in the town of Scotland, a 20-year resident of Bethlehem School District, and I'm happy to learn that there is a add-back provision in the law. That's a good find. Thank you very much, because I support open space. I live in a town that has lots of open space, and I love it. I did want to ask if I see the town will be doing an annual report on, the participation and, probably tax revenue. Would you guys be able to put that sort of thing together as well if this program gets going, and see, how it's working out for the school revenue and similar participation, just as a transparency? I know you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it would be the same report. It would be what?
Oh, school district would be in that same town report?
Yeah, right. You guys would be reporting on what was saved with school taxes and everything. It would be a report. And we would, I don't want to speak for the future board, but I would anticipate they would more than willingly put it on our website as a link or whatever.
Okay, and have input too on, whether it affected enrollments or other thoughts. We'd want to know that from you as well.
Right.
Okay. And so I understand how this add back works in terms of making sure it's functioning the way it's written in paper. Is there some sort of agreement between the town and the, is it in writing somewhere to say that or will it be in writing to say that there will not be a shift, or, mathematically to the New Scotland? I'm telling you, I don't oppose open space. I'm just making sure that I already pay my town taxes.
Yeah.
Making sure.
Within the resolution that the board would adopt, there would be language that would specify that this hold harmless provision would be built into the apportionment of the tax levy between the two towns. So by adding back any assessments that were participating in this conservation easement, you are effectively holding harmless New Scotland residents from picking up that share of the tax levy.
So
yes,
every
it
year,
would
when
be
you
part
talk
of-
about how you're going to say, here's your tax levy for New Scotland, and here's your tax levy for Bethlehem, when you're doing your school budget stuff, when my ears perk up. I'm just wondering if, is that something that you kind of put in plain English terms for the folks that aren't really the assessors in the world?
Yeah, absolutely,
okay.
absolutely. We would cover that, that whether we're talking about equalization rates or any of the other terminology used by assessors, our job is to make it understandable for people. So whenever we have something of significance or something new that affects the tax rate calculations, I always would make a point to include that within the presentations. So this would be something that is potentially new, so yes, we would want to cover that within the tax rate meeting. where
And
we
I
present
get
that.
the idea that there's only so many landowners that could participate, but you guys use some models to predict your enrollment, and, you know, I already have my issues with those models. They're only intended for stable periods, not for peaks or fast drops. We know we've had some problems with that in the past. What would you expect this to, what the impact would be on, I mean, it's probably really hard to tease out, the impact on future enrollment, but, you know, I'm certainly looking forward to my community neighborhood school to be open someday. So I'm just wondering, you know, I don't know, we don't have a water supply that's really gonna, you know, create robust development in my town, and we also have a lot of zoning. I'm sure Doug can talk to at great lengths about our master plan, our comprehensive plan, and our zoning requirements and 50-foot setbacks. I mean, you guys have a 5-foot setback between properties. So that's the way we kind of keep density from not getting too, you know, crowded to address those concerns. And we've always been, I think, a very rural community anyway. But is there any projections you could wager, any bets you could wager on what the impacts might be? Because these are your big landholders, and where they are with respect to your boundaries of elementary school enrollment?
I would
I wouldn't want to place any bets on things right now. But we actually contracted with Capital Region Planning Board this year to work on, and they work on projected enrollment, and they also work with the town to gather information on potential development in all the areas within the school district and project out for several years. And they'll be presenting to the board in the fall sometime. So obviously, with the conservation easement, obviously, there's not going to be any immediate impact related to that, but that would be something they would factor in as part of that process.
And I think you could refer to the map that Rob put up there. Those are all potential properties that could be developed. I mean, they may not all be residential development, but vast majority, I would imagine, could entail residential development. So
Majority do, yeah.
that's real, and it's unknown. Is someone going to sell their property in 5 years, 10 years? They're going to sell it in 2 years? It's stuff that the board, we have no control over, you know? So,
Okay, just make a mention. Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for the
Thank you for your comments.
add back.
Yes. Yep. Anyone else want to address the board before we have further discussion on it? Okay. All right, I would ask that if I could get a motion on the resolution that is adopted under subject C of number 5, item
So
number
moved.
5.
Second?
First and second. Any discussion on that resolution?
I
Further
will.
discussion?
My vote's going to reflect the fact that the data is 10 years old because it says 2005, what people said, and some of the questions were a little ambiguous in terms of, I think 73% of people said the town could purchase land or purchase easement, so there's 2 questions in there. I personally would, I support everything that people said, but I really would want to hear about from the taxpayers. So I can't vote for or against this without knowing what the people, if we, for example, did a referendum. And it's not that I don't support conservation or open space, I just would want taxpayers to tell me what we should do in this situation. So, and I appreciate all the extra work and time and energy people put into developing the report. But for me, I can't vote for or against it because I just don't know. There are taxpayers in this town who will tell me not one more dollar. Charmaine, I can't afford to live here. And these are the people who raise their children here and are struggling to stay in. So I feel like I need to listen to that. And without those voices, I can't vote for or against it.
And I would say that to put it up to a referendum, it really is a board decision, and that's why we're elected as individuals within the community. And, you know, the flip side would be development does cost money, and it strains on the school district and the town and the county, so.
And we did do a study years ago on that, how much a residence costs in terms of, you know, per students in that household. And, you know, the tax revenue does not support the number of children, you know, in those particular residences. So,
Mike?
I would say that in general, I am opposed to any programs that shift the tax burden from one group to another. But given that the impact is so minimal for this and the potential benefits to the town of Bethlehem are so great, I would support this.
Here's where I'm coming from. I think since we talked about this last year, I've now driven by, I don't know, maybe 4 new developments that scare the heck out of me. On Wemple Road, there's one on Kenwood, there's a new one going in across from the town park that's gonna connect to that Fieldstone neighborhood, and there's probably like 3 others I don't even know about. But every time I drive by those, I think, how many houses are going in here? They're all single family. They are going to attract families with children, which is wonderful. But how do we absorb those costs, and are we planning for them? And not just in the school system, because there is going to be a burden that we will have to figure out how to manage. But, you know, we also have built a town structure of services that is built off of a certain model that doesn't include another, you know, X number miles of roadways that need to be paved, and they need to be maintained, and they have to be plowed. And, you know, that growth just seems, and you know, I know the town doesn't have a lot of tools. I wish you had more tools to actually put a lid on some of that development, because I really worry about what the effect is. All of the folks here, many of whom are taxpayers in the town of Bethlehem, who wear multiple hats, I know at least 3 of you spoke, live in the town of Bethlehem and pay taxes as well as being advocates. This burden is something we're all going to experience, and I'm kind of with Mike, where you know, there's pennies on the dollar here. If you look at this, the best case scenario would be it affects us to the maximum. And if you look at that map with all those green little plots, we should all be really, really nervous, because if we don't do something to address the potential of, you know, all that development, we're not only going to have the tax burden, but this town is going to change, and we might not like the changes. So I don't think we're going to see unfortunately for, you know, the open space concept, I don't think we're going to see that many people opting in, but the more we incentivize through, I think, pretty sort of non-controversial ways, which are by, you know, incentivizing through tax, you know, through tax relief in some level. So I'm a big supporter of this, and I saw the green map and got really nervous, because in addition to the developments that I drive by, those are potentially in the planning stages of our town. And we as a school district in 10 years might be looking at a whole different scenario.
All those greens were pretty much in the old former Clarksville district.
No, not
No,
all of them.
no.
There's some close to the Albany line, and they seem like they're the perimeter, but.
We went through this back in the 90s because it was the same, kind of the same scenario. And, you know, I look at some of the areas that were all green space that over the years have become developed, and why we needed to do all those additions to the elementary school, and of course, middle school and high school also. All that growth, and there were dozens of developments that were on the books that didn't actually materialize until, you know, maybe 5 or 10 years later, and it really did have an impact on the school district. So I understand where you're coming from on this, because the same thing could happen again. I do feel, you know, the fact that we didn't do that, you know, a year ago, whatever passed us, I don't think that would have changed those people that are developing those
no.
properties. And I'm not sure how many people's minds will be changed, but even if 1 or 2 decide to do
Right.
this, to me, it's a major accomplishment, you know, to save some green space in development. So, I mean, obviously, I do support this.
Christine?
I supported it when we voted on it the last time, and nothing has changed. I think a lot of people moved to the Bethlehem area because of the rural space and the tight-knit community. And I think since I've been here, which is 15 years, we've lost a little bit of it. I remember going down Fairbush, and I could see the wild turkeys, and now there stands an apartment complex which I have nothing against the apartment complex, but I miss my wild turkeys and part of the reason that I moved here. So I think it adds to the schools, I think it adds to the property values, it adds to the open air, the quality, and I still support it.
And in closing, I would say before we take the vote, again, I did vote against it. I do support it now. My concern was the inequity of New Scotland residents not being able to participate in an easement program, yet would be sharing the burden. So that has been addressed, and I think it is a good tool for the town. And I hope it becomes a model program and is utilized so that it could be something that the legislature would look towards in the future to expand statewide. So, okay.
Do you think you should read the resolution?
Should I read the whole
I
resolution?
mean, we have a first and a second, but maybe for the audience.
You have to read the whole thing? Does he have to read the whole
Do I have to read the whole resolution?
Does he?
I don't think you have to.
Or just read part of it.
Oh, well, I guess,
Why wouldn't
I would rather, I'll read the last
last
section.
part.
Resolved by the virtue, now be it therefore, resolved by virtue of the authority granted to it by the real estate tax law, section 491A, the Board of Education adopts the conservation easement agreement exemption as provided in Article 7 of Chapter 111 of the Town Code as it applies to taxation for school purposes. And be it further resolved that the Board of Education designates the conservation easement agreement exemption as an exemption that shall be included in the total assessed valuation of the town for apportionment purposes only, as provided by real property tax law, section 1314, and be it further resolved that the first school tax levy subject to the inclusion of the conservation agreement exemption shall be based upon the assessment rolls prepared after March 1st, 2017. So, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? One. Okay, so that 6-1. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your comments and participation.
Speaking of which, participation.
It's a little after 9, so the participation and government students that are here will take a 5-minute break, so you can come up and sign out. And if you have a form that we need to sign, we'll do that for you. And then after that, okay, we'll resume the meeting. Going on to item number 6, recognition of visitors who would like to address the board on an agenda item. Anyone? No? Okay, we'll move on to item number 7, finance action items. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following finance action items 1 through 3.
So moved.
It's a first and second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? That item carries. Item number 8, professional personnel. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following personnel action items 1 through 23.
So moved.
Second.
First and second, any discussion?
I have a question. Some of these folks are taking on additional classes because of reallocation of FTAs, and it brings them up past the 1.0 place.
Yeah.
So how does someone who's 1.2?
They get a 20% raise.
No. How do they manage that during a school day?
They have one less planning time.
Okay, so they just take
have
off the
to-
planning time. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Or their own free period, really, right? Because they get a free
Yeah, right.
period at planning time, and they teach 5 classes normally.
Right, and supervision.
Right.
So they essentially lose planning period.
Okay, because they still do the supervision, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Does this affect their benefits?
Mhm.
So if their salary is X and they're teaching an extra period, so they get X plus 1?
They get extra salary, they don't get any extra benefits.
So there's not.
Well, no, I think
what if
clarification, it may impact their pension.
Yeah.
Because it
Well,
would be
yeah,
pension.
but it doesn't impact like days or things like that. Is that
No,
what you're referring
but
to?
it does affect
Oh, sure,
potentially
because
their
it's
pension.
total salary.
Total salary, okay. So there is a cost to the district on that side of it as well as the raw salary. Okay.
But the flip side being, if we hired a full-time teacher, we're going to have.
Right, we're gonna pay
full
that
Health
anyway.
insurance and
Right,
all
yeah,
that.
right.
Same.
Plus,
You're
any
going
other
to
quality
pay, you're going to
because
pay
of
retirement
parent
on that no matter who gets it.
Right.
really,
Right,
because
but you
it's-
may actually if these are more senior level people than a person
Right.
coming in for that position, the retirement load might be actually more than.
No, because
although-
it's based on, if I understand it correctly, the pension assessment is based on total payroll.
Well, it's, yeah, every individual participating member, it's a percentage of their salary.
Right.
Right.
So if, whether, it's the same percentage whether they make 100,000 or 20,000. So
Right.
if that person was making 80,000, someone else making 20, it's still going to be the same percentage paid.
Same total salary.
Same total salary, so same amount would go to retirement that we would have to pay.
We don't typically have people do this long-term. This is generally a
Right.
short-term, a
Right.
year.
So-
These are semester
Okay.
on an as-needed basis.
I think
so
we've done for
there's no-
technology at the middle schools.
Yeah, there's no
Whether you needed just-
long-term impact.
And the extra sections may not add up to a whole 1.0 or even a 0.5 or 0.6, you know, it's someone who's maybe at a 0.4 and then they don't get benefits, it'd be hard to attract someone who would want that. you know.
Correct.
I guess I just want to clarify the retirement part. It's going to be paid, if we're paying that salary out, it's going to be paid one way or the other by us.
No, I get that, I just.
That person's
I'll ask-
recipient, their salaries,
Individual.
their pension's going to be higher, but that's a different calculation that's done.
Right.
Okay. Any further discussion? No. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? That item carries. Moving on to item number 9, support personnel. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following support staff action items 1 through 46.
So moved.
Second.
First and second, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? That item carries. Item number 10. Let me get to the pages. Other action. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following action items 1 through 3.
So moved.
First and second, any discussion?
I do have some questions. On the DASA coordinator and the homeless coordinator, are those, they are being given to Mr. Hurst, I believe. Are those traditional roles for the assistant superintendent? Or I know the DASA was once one of the deans or something. DASA
Well,
one.
that's at the building level. You have to designate someone district
At the
level.
district level, okay.
And typically, that would have been done at the annual meeting, but they were left off. So in the future, they'll be on the July annual board meeting.
And it's a traditional to give it, to be at the assistant superintendent level?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That item carries. Item number 11, at this time, the board would recognize anyone who would like to address us on a non-agenda item? No? Oh, okay.
So I'm bummed that Doug left. I wanted to ask you about the PPA for the solar, the power purchase agreement for the solar project that you guys were considering out on LaGrange farmland adjacent to my land. So I'm wondering, why did the district, why are you leaning toward a PPA? Because, you know, I had this big, long conversation with Bill Reinhardt, former town of Bethlehem, really involved in the Solarized program. I'm an avid supporter of the Solarized, Albany County Solarized program. Why didn't you guys decide on putting solar on your roofs on the buildings where you consume the electricity? Why are you putting a PPE, entering a PPE through the New York Sun program? I know, but
Is Greg here? Would he have?
No, Greg left. I'll take a stab at playing the role of Greg Nolte in answering this question. But there are engineering considerations for putting those types of arrays on the roof. We've had recent roof work done, and obviously, it's impacting your roof if you have to lift off the solar panels in order to do any maintenance on there. The remote, or these external fields are becoming more common. Again, Greg had talked with our consultants on this as well, and that was deemed to be the most viable option for the district. So-
okay. Because, I mean, I had to put support on my roof, and I mean, it was done in 6 hours. I just didn't put a knee wall up.
But,
I
I
know
mean, we have all
house,
sorts
not
of
flat
code
roofs, you know, it's pretty different,
associated.
but-
I
Could he
mean,
perhaps address that at the next meeting? Just forward him the
Yeah.
question and
Yeah.
ask him to.
yeah.
I'd
But
be
they
more than
also
happy to
talked
get-
about there wasn't enough space on our roofs for the
Yeah,
amount of
just-
solar panels that we
Yeah,
needed. That was discussed at a previous meeting.
Yeah, you have to have enough yield out of those solar
You could get
panels in order to make it.
110% of
Yeah.
your consumption, annual consumption.
Mhm.
But, you know, doing the math all adds up, and I've talked to many, many people about this. Buying it is better than entering, Doug would kill me for saying this, into a PPA mathematically. You guys throw bonds out there a lot, and I just don't know, I mean, I guess we're running out of time. If the Republicans do continue to control the Congress this year, I'm certain they will let the federal 30% tax rebate go. I don't know what that means to a school district, because I pay taxes on property.
I think we get different credits through NYSERDA
Yeah,
and
it's through
stuff like
NYSERDA that we
so-
get the
NYSERDA
credits.
still has your
Credit.
the state still has 25% rebates and the big credit.
But I
You
think
get
for
you get an immediate
school district, it
rebate.
might be different than
Yeah, there's
residential.
block.
You get immediate
tiering,
block grant
and there's-
rebates, yes.
Depends on where you land
Right,
within that
you get
tiered
more of it
structure.
early in the year because they
Yeah.
do issue it in terms of blocks, but
Mhm.
I was just kind of, and if you are going to discuss that, I would be more than happy to bring a couple of friends who are solar people to maybe kind of learn about this a little bit, because I was kind of surprised that you were going the road of PPA, but if it's an engineering issue, I guess that's something
Yeah.
I mean,
I
it's
can-
something that we've already decided on,
Yeah.
and that we have contracts in place.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on getting the contracts finalized
That's right.
with the
And we already
awarded
went through the whole
provider. So
RFP
we've been
process.
Oh,
We
you
had
did that.
at
Yeah.
several public meetings
Yeah.
discussed it and
Yeah.
went through the process.
like many parents, I can't keep track of everything.
Yeah, so we're at the tail
I
end of
mean,
that
we would be
process
hard
as
pressed
opposed
to
to.
switch gears right now.
Yeah.
Because we've
I
got
agree.
all the legal implications of we've issued the RFP, there's been some
And an
issues, and
award
we're
of
working
it.
through those, and an award the letter. or award.
Too bad I missed that one, sorry. So my request, my big ask, it's a big project, because we have a little community called Unionville right next to it. I would really like to see some visualizations on what the visual impacts would be to folks that live right next to it. I mean, I know there's only a handful of houses that would see it, so probably not, big on your list, but I would like to see some sort of visualizations, because they can certainly do screenings in a way that you don't, have impact of your solar insolation that would affect your energy production. But that would be really appreciated by me.
Yeah, definitely, we'll look into that. Yep. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? No, okay, future meetings, the next, Wednesday, September 21st is our next Board of Education meeting. Executive session anticipated to start at 6 PM with a public meeting at 7 PM, and that will be at the middle school library. The next meeting after that is Thursday, September 22nd, as mentioned earlier, at 10:30 a.m. at the Bethlehem Public Library. Jody Monroe, as superintendent, will be presenting to anyone from the community that would like to attend that meeting on our potential bond project. And then the next Board of Education meeting is October 5th, 6 PM anticipated executive session, 7 PM public meeting. That will be back here at the high school, at the Library Media Center.
And we also are encouraging residents to speak out at our board meetings regarding the bond issue, too.
Yep, especially at the next one, we'll have that public forum.
Well, I was going to say, the next meeting, the 21st, is going to be a public forum, right, on the
Yes,
bond?
yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and we'll make sure SNN notifiers start going out tomorrow, maybe in 4 more days, and then.
Do you remember when our retreat, is our retreat later in the fall? Do we have a retreat?
October.
Yeah, it's in October.
Or November 3rd.
Right.
I
It's
have
later in
November
October.
1st, 5 to 8.
Okay, thanks.
Tuesday, November 1st.
November
Down the
1st.
road, down the road.
All right, I do not believe there's any need to go back in exec session, right?
Have to get up here to take it.
I move to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Yeah, motion to adjourn. First, second, all in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.